Today I'm sharing the recording of an interview by Jane Bayler from the Smart Connector podcast, where she interviewed me all about my journey from being a total control freak property owner to living a true laptop lifestyle, living in Sweden and running my businesses remotely with remote teams. It's not all been plain sailing over the years, and I think due to the relationship I've got with Jane, I've known her for years, I'm very comfortable around her, I opened up and I probably went more in depth about some of the things that the challenges that I've had over the years, about the mindset shifts I've had to take, about some of the things that went wrong and some of the things that went right as well. And I hope that by listening to this, you will see not only that there is possible to get there, but understand that the fear you have of letting go, the challenges you're facing right now, they're all normal. And it's just part of the process that we go through in order to create a business that truly serves us. So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us, who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day, and this is Systemise Your Success.
Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. I've got a very exciting guest for you tonight, Steve Day. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much for having me, Jane. Absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Now, Steve and I have known each other for a number of years, and I've been so excited to see his progress, and particularly this very exciting business that he has at the moment, which is based around one of my favorite topics because it's really the source of scale, which is systems and outsourcing. So we're really going to be getting into that. But Steve, let's just talk about you before we do. What's your background? Why are you so passionate about systems and outsourcing? And also, you're a doctor, aren't you? So how did you make that journey from being a doctor to being a systems and outsourcing specialist?
Okay, I'll try and squeeze my life history into 2 minutes. So I have got a degree in computing. That was my first ever degree. That was back in 2000. I then property development for 8 years. I then became a doctor. And in the meantime, I had a few businesses, which unfortunately didn't go so well. I was a doctor for 8 years. And then we decided to move to Sweden with my wife, who's Swedish, and to bring up our family here. And in doing that, my businesses based in the UK suddenly were a bit of a problem, because they were over there and I was over here. And so it really made me think very differently about the way I worked, about my role in my company, about what it means to be a business person. And also just sort of shortly after we moved here, unfortunately, my father passed away suddenly, and he was sort of my anchor man in the UK looking after my businesses. So not only was I away from the business, I didn't really have anyone on the ground at all. So it totally made me change the way I thought about work. And for years, I was a control freak, micromanager, really failing to let go, never getting anybody to help me do anything, thinking I always knew best. It was cheaper, quicker, simpler to do it myself. And so this transition from being this typical one-man band, like so many of us are, to now like to trying to outsource everything I possibly can to virtual assistants, to agencies, to teams, to lettings managers, whatever it is, and figuring out how to do that really smoothly and effectively is a huge mindset shift for me, and one that a lot of business owners need to go on in order to be in a position to scale or live remotely and have the laptop lifestyle. And so, yeah, that was the catalyst for me moving here, my dad passing away, and then me figuring out I didn't want to spend my life traveling back to the UK away from my family. And in the mix of that, I decided I didn't want to be a doctor because it was taking me away from doing the things that I really love to do in life. And my passion has always been in business, funnily enough. The doctoring bit was sort of a glitch as far as I'm concerned, because it sort of came in after I had a couple of failed businesses and nearly went bankrupt and then felt a bit lost in the world. And my parents are both GPs, so they said, oh, go and try be a doctor. So I did that for 8 years and then ended up, as I said, not to repeat myself, living in Sweden, living remotely, working with teams all over the world. My remote team is now based in the Philippines, and I also have a PA in the UK, and then letting agencies and marketing people. I've got a guy in Finland, for example, that does my marketing, and various other people. So yeah.
Yeah, so funnily enough, you mentioned that those magic words, laptop lifestyle, right? So I have conversations with people and they don't even believe that this exists. And I say, well, actually, I know people that do have the laptop lifestyle and it is a reality. But what does it take in order to get that is the question, because people genuinely believe that. I think that people make this up and that it is not possible to do that and to run a business. So let's talk about what does it actually take to have a laptop lifestyle. And of course, a laptop lifestyle just means location freedom, right? Doesn't it?
It does. It takes, depending on the type of business you have, it takes more or less of a challenge to accomplish it. But it's definitely possible in, I would say, pretty much most businesses where you're not physically the person doing the work and you want to continue doing the physical work yourself locally. So if you're a hairdresser and you want to actually cut people's hair, then, well, you can still take a laptop. You wouldn't have a salon, for example. You just travel the world and cut people's hair. So you could do it still. But the point is, that is all about your role in your company. So even if you have a brick and mortar company, even if you have a company where you were the artisan or whatever, you've got to make a choice. Are you in it for the business or are you in it for the passion and the love of the thing? And if you read a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it as a high-level book for how to systemize your business. Really good intro book into the world of the concepts and the mindset of systemization. And that's all about just understanding that a business owner isn't actually the person who does the work, shouldn't be, because you can't grow a business if you're the one doing it because you are only you. And so even if you've got that type of, you're a plumber, you're a plasterer, whatever, then if you replace yourself with other people doing the work, then there's no reason why even those circumstances you can't. So a long-winded intro into how you create a laptop lifestyle. Property is one of these things as well. People think that that's not a reality. And I used to run all my own properties, every aspect of property management I've done for many years. And so I was working myself, I should say, into an early grave, totally overwhelmed, doing lettings, everything, doing cleaning at one point, doing all the decorating, all the maintenance, while I was training as a doctor, traveling back from Derby to Manchester. And so, I've burnt the candle at both ends for years doing all that stuff, just believing that I couldn't trust anybody else to find the right tenants. I had one instance when I actually let someone else find my tenants and didn't go so well, and it totally tarnished my opinion of using other people to source tenants and look after them. And so it took me, as I said before, to be forced to think differently to make that change, because I had the decision: I either sell up, and after spending best part of 15 years building a portfolio, after with the way, leveraging in the market at the time and etc., I wouldn't have actually got much out of it. It would have just been such a waste. And the portfolio I've got is a lifelong investment, and it will continue to serve me well into many, many years to come. If I sold it, I'm back to almost square one, maybe with a bit of cash in the pocket for a short time. And so I was determined not to. So then I put all my efforts into finding good people. And that wasn't about me hiring my own property manager in-house, because that itself is a huge, huge task. And I've only got 7 properties. It just doesn't make any sense. A lot of clients come to me about properties. I'm going a bit of a tangent, but a lot of listeners probably have property and they're probably managing a lot of it themselves. And a lot of clients come to me and say, "Oh, I want you to help me systemize my property management." And the first thing I ask them is, how big do you want to get? And unless they have a desire to have over $500,000 in income within the next year or two, maximum sort of time frame, I'd say use letting agents. Unless you're going to go to 100 properties, use letting agents. Because when you do the math and you realize the hassle and the amount of legislation you've got to keep on top of, and the amount of hassle that happens when your property manager just doesn't turn up to work one day and says, "Oh, sorry, I'm not coming back," and suddenly it's all back on you just when you're about to go on holiday with your family, it's just not worth it. And so with a small amount of money, the 10, 12% you pay to a letting agent, it frees you up. And okay, there's still management of the letting agent, and that's what I have a PA to do. So I systemize the management of my letting agents and spent 2 years finding a good letting agent. And that transformed my life. It allowed me to have a truly lifestyle. So I literally log into my emails once a week to check my property emails and do about 15 minutes of work on average. Some weeks I just forget and don't bother, unless my PA pings me a message saying, "You need to check your emails." And so I don't need to, because I know my PA will let me know if there's anything important. I do it once a week, and 15 minutes once a week, done. That's my property portfolio taken care of. And that leaves me free to then start another business, which I chose to build a business online, helping people to systemize their businesses. So yeah. A long answer to a short question.
Yeah, yeah. But I think the interesting thing about your story, Steve, is that you've really come through this from the hard experience of having suffered the pain of not systemizing and that overwhelm and that burnout that is so common amongst entrepreneurs. And I think you also referenced something that is certainly very familiar to me and to a lot of other people that I know, which is that as entrepreneurs, as business founders, we do struggle to let go sometimes and actually let other people take the reins because it's hard to trust, isn't it? It is. But if we don't get out of our own way, then we're always going to be stuck in this place. I've actually coined a name for it, and I call it the harder hustle loop, because that's what it is really, isn't it? Because you're going round and round and round on this kind of treadmill, like this hamster wheel, and you're not really making much progress, are you?
No, I think, thinking back, I spent almost 15 years on that hamster wheel. Even then, though, I actually have always been quite a systems orientated person. Because I did a degree in computing, I actually really like flowcharts and process mapping, something I get quite excited about. I could lose hours designing and making flowcharts and process maps look pretty. And I love technology. I love apps. I created my own property management system, all my own, before any software existed, like Arthur and all these like clever systems are out there now. So I actually designed my own and actually got an app building company to start actually building out a piece of software for me to do property management and everything. So I've been there, I've done it all. But all of that still was for me to manage my properties, to make my life easier. And it was only when I was forced to, as I say, think about, well, who's going to do this stuff now I'm not on the ground? And I started learning about hiring remotely. So I had the first PA I hired was from the UK. And then I went a bit further afield to an agency in India. And then finally took the plunge and actually had my own staff from the Philippines. So it was a progression. And I understand that, when you're doing it yourself, like I was, and just reading books and figuring it out and doing the odd course here and there, it can be a bit scary to start off with. So I took it stepwise, baby steps. But in doing so, I was able to then trust people more because I didn't just delegate everything in one go. And so the trust element that you mentioned then, that the letting go, was something that I had to build up systems to allow me to delegate effectively so that I could trust the results of the people that they were going to produce for me, because it's my name on the door at the end of the day, or, so to speak. So if something goes wrong, it's our names, I should say, as business owners. If something goes wrong, if someone does something wrong, if someone, we were talking about before about outsourcing LinkedIn, that can be really challenging, LinkedIn and social media in general. And if someone posts something that's against what you would say normally, it actually makes you look to be something you're not or something. I mean, that can be devastating to you as a personal brand. And so, how do I avoid that? And that's the fears that people have. I mean, the reality is actually often very, very different from that. And even if it's not done perfectly, it's very rarely done badly or in a way that actually has any negative effect. But getting to that point of trusting that and believing that is quite a big step for most people, especially if you just spent years building up this, you nurture this baby of yours, your business baby, and you've nurtured it, you brought it up, it's sort of in adolescence now, you're just about to let it bloom, and then you think, okay, now I'm going to trust somebody else to look after my kid, my business baby. And that is a huge mental step for a lot of people. So I work a lot with people about that, about trusting, how to build trust, so build systems of trust into your business. So how to start relationships off well, so that you develop trust with someone really quickly, how to talk to them in such a way that you are developing a rapport, how to give feedback so you don't break down trust and you actually build trust and build respect for each other by giving meaningful, constructive feedback with a goal of changing future behavior, not chastising or berating someone for past behavior. So all these sorts of soft skills are absolutely essential. And it's not stuff that we learn as business owners. And arguably, a lot of people come from the corporate world and they come out. And I think that they almost like, I know with being a doctor, we learned so much of this stuff as a doctor, but I never really applied it to my own business until I sort of stopped and like someone, I can't remember if it was someone else, but it's sort of a realization happened. I think, I know how to do this stuff. I've been through the training, but I'm not doing it in my own business. And so I've been bringing all that skills, all those soft skills and all the leadership skills from whatever walks of life you've got, but really think about how do I apply those in the context of a small business, not in a big establishment, because it's a different skill set, but you can still use those skills you developed. And I think that, again, is something that most business owners don't think enough about. And that's why people often struggle to build lasting, trusting, long-term relationships with people, whether it be employees or even harder is when you're working with people remotely, because you don't have the opportunity to meet them and sort of face to face, so to speak. So things like using video, massively important, and like simple things like you communicating by video all day long, not writing long emails and then wondering why things get misinterpreted because you're speaking with somebody whose first language, even though they're absolutely fluent in English, their first language isn't English. So they misinterpret you something you say, or they take your criticism rather harshly because you typed it and not said it with a smile on your face. These little skills are what can make the big difference between building trust with somebody. Like once you trust them, then learning to let go little bit by little bit until you can actually see the light of how businesses grow. All businesses go through this. No one's special. No one's business is different from anybody else's. Everyone thinks their business is, I couldn't possibly get someone to do that. Oh, it's got to be me. The customers love me. They would leave if it wasn't me. Say that to Bill Gates. Say that to Elon Musk. Say that to any big business owner in the world. And they'll tell you they thought exactly the same thing until they actually transitioned. And I'm not saying that you give up everything on day one. I'm saying this is a transition, but you've got to realize that business owners or businesses that have grown beyond the business owner at some point had this mental barrier that they had to break through, and they managed to, and that's why they're now big businesses. So if you ever want to grow beyond you at some point, and I'm not going to pretend that I've learned how to let go of absolutely everything yet. I'm still struggle to think, how could I get someone to do X, Y, or Z, and maybe it's because I can't afford to hire in the level of person that I need to do that yet. Maybe that's the barrier for me right now at some of my tasks. But most of what I do, the vast majority, I've now learned that there is a way to get someone to do it. It's just about a process and having a system behind that.
Yeah, I love that process and system. And my brain was just firing off in all sorts of different directions when you were speaking, because there were so many things that really resonated with me. And I was just remembering when I was running my design of a brand identity agency, and this thing that everybody had with the naming of media agencies back in the day when I was in that job. And they all thought it was a great idea to put their surname into the name of the business. So they would all be called, I don't know, all these ad agencies, Whedon and Kennedy. So the names of those founders. And of course, what happened is when the clients came to the company, they would get mortally insulted if look, it's their name above the door. I'm an important client. They're the people that I want. And it's funny when you look back and you think, how long did it take agencies to actually wise up to the fact that they were really just putting a millstone around their neck to call themselves by their own names? It's funny, isn't it? And it's just changed that it's even reflected in this kind of naming strategy. But I think we haven't actually been brought up with this whole thing of remote working, have we? And I think that's part of the problem, that everybody has been so at sea with it because, we were brought up to think we were going to be working in real locations with real people. And there wasn't really the opportunity.
They are still real, Jane.
Yeah, they are real. They are real. I know. Real in inverted commas. But I work with my team remotely, and it's been very interesting to me to see the challenges that come up, because one of the things that happened for me recently was my Jonathan, who works with me on the marketing. I realized that he wasn't actually, of course, hearing any of the conversations that I was having with my clients, and he wasn't hearing any of the sales conversations. And in a way, he was kind of operating in a bit of a vacuum. He was missing a big piece because he wasn't hearing me in action, really. He was missing all of that. And there were times when he was getting a little bit demotivated and a bit lonely. And hi, Jonathan, if you're listening, I hope you don't mind me talking about you in this way, but it's just a symptom of that distance. And I realized that, I really needed to be working harder to actually bring him into those conversations or to talk to him about those conversations. And it just hadn't kind of entered my head to give him a more holistic perspective really on my business. So what you're saying makes so much sense. Is really how you manage people is just the demands, the further away they are, the greater the demand, really. Isn't that right? Then the greater the rewards as well.
Totally. I mean, whether it's somebody who's 3 doors down the road or on the other side of the world, these days it doesn't really make any difference. I mean, the only difference is that it's harder to pop round for a cup of coffee. But actually, from a working perspective, especially since COVID, everyone's now used to this. And, before, I've been going, we started in 2007, the beginning of 2017. So actually way before COVID kicked in. And so one of the challenges that we used to have to overcome with people was this belief that, is it possible to actually have a working relationship with someone you never met? And a lot of those barriers have been dropped now, not entirely with everybody, but huge amounts of the population now enjoy working remotely. My wife, for example, absolutely loves it. She doesn't have to go into the office. She's an auditor and she used to work silly hours, but she spent an hour traveling there, an hour traveling back. She's quite introverted, so she's not really a people person anyway. She'd much rather sit in her room and get her work done and go for a walk and do her phone calls, on the phone while she's walking around the forests. And so with that sort of a mentality of, they see the benefits of remote working and think, oh, actually it is possible. We're going back to the laptop lifestyle. It's just one step away from that. If employees are now used to working remotely, and whether you start thinking about your own business now or you're an employee and you work in a business, then this idea of having remote staff, once that's possible, then you think, okay, well, that's a huge step in the right direction to having the ability to take my business online, to be able to work from anywhere. So yeah, I just think that this, looking for a cloud, every cloud has a silver lining. I think one for the world of business in general is that what COVID has forced us to do is to really advance technology and also advance mindset about what it means to be in a workforce, whether that's as a business owner or as an employee. And I think that ultimately, that will be good for the world, but for the population as a whole, for health reasons, mental health reasons, and for the fact that the global workforce is now accelerated. So we can leverage the fact that in other parts of the world, the cost of living means that you can pay someone a really good wage, who's got high education, they've got degrees, they've got marketing masters or whatever it is that you need. And when you're just a fledgling business starting out and you couldn't possibly afford to hire someone with that level of expertise from the UK or where I'm in Sweden, or if you lived in Switzerland, it'd be even worse. You couldn't possibly afford that level of a person. Then actually now we can actually really get our feet off the ground by finding people who are desperate for work in some of the poorest countries of the world, but who are highly educated, who are highly talented and hugely motivated to do a good job. And we can then build our businesses up. And then if you want to then put that back into the local community and hire locally, when you get to a certain stage, you're thinking, okay, I need to then hire a team, then great. Then that, have that as part of your company plan and your structure and your vision for your future. But actually, I think what most business owners is find, if you look at the businesses that grow, is that the reason I'm going into this a little bit is because sometimes people worry about, is it morally right to hire someone from the Philippines when there's job problems in the UK? But I think you've got to look at 9 out of 10 businesses fail. 75% of businesses are one-man bands because they can't afford to hire staff. So you've got to look at the statistics of, if you don't get help, you're going to fail, and therefore no one's going to get a job. If you're successful, then you've got the choice. And it's a bit, so you've got to get success first before you can start being generous with, wage, or not generous is probably the wrong word, but choosing where, and or have the ability to choose where you hire from. Yeah. And so what I was saying, just leading on from that, is interesting when you look at the bigger companies, because what they don't do is hire locally. They hire from the world and look for the best talent. They're now looking at the best talent that they're going to pay the most for, probably. So it's probably going to be based in somewhere like, America or England or whatever. But it's a worldwide job market at both ends of the scale. And I think that people miss that because you're hiring from somewhere which is less affluent, then some reason that there's a guilt involved in that. It'd be okay to hire somewhere that was more affluent, from somewhere more affluent, even though it's not local. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think you're so right about this guilt thing. I think people do get very much sort of tied up in, is this right? Should I be hiring, should I be supporting our own country and our own economy? Is it right for me to be paying people in the Philippines, $5 an hour or $3 an hour or whatever it is? And as you said, well, I mean, you just made a very good case for why that's okay. And really, as you said, nobody wants to go bust. Nobody wants to lose their businesses and have all of that pain and have their families suffer that pain. And anything that they can do to avoid that has to be a good thing, right?
Yeah, I think so. But don't get me wrong, I'm in no way against hiring people from the UK. I mean, my PA is based in the UK because I wanted a UK-based PA. So there is the right person for each role. But I wouldn't have wanted someone, for that particular role, I wanted someone in the UK for various reasons. And I think that, I know I've got lots of our clients who have a mix of UK-based staff, and then they have some admin support in the Philippines, which allows them to have a bit more capital to be able to grow. And I think there's a really good model there that you can have both. It doesn't need to be exclusively either. And I think it's a really that hybrid sort of idea of a lot of my clients actually start out thinking, oh, I'll hire someone from the Philippines because I'll get them to do my admin, my low level value tasks. And after what some of them have found, one person in particular, is that the person they had in the Philippines was more capable than most of their UK based staff. And they're now juggling with this dilemma of how do they then bring that person on board as a sort of a real full-time in part of the company, and do they pay them an English wage? Do they all these sorts of interesting dilemmas? So, or do they bring them over to the UK? Is another thing. So I've got one of my other clients. He's construction, and one of his team based in the Philippines as well. And he has aspirations to move to the UK. And my client has said, look, I think you're brilliant. I want you in the company. Come over. I'll pay you an English wage, and you can live here and pay your taxes in England, and so everyone's happy here, and the government's happy here and everything. And so I think there's so many interesting stories around it that you don't really realize. It's not just a bit of admin work here and there and a few bits of graphic design. It's like these are people, and there's a range of people all over the world with different skill sets and different abilities and different desires and different dreams and ambitions. And if you tap into that worldwide global workforce in whatever context that means for you at the time you are in business, then you're dipping into a pool that's almost an infinite number. So you can find brilliant people who just love doing the stuff you need them to do, rather than having to think locally. For example, on the other end of the other scale, if you've got an office, a physical office, you're limiting yourself. Okay, if you lived in London, you've got quite a big pool, but say if you lived in a town, in a suburb, and you're limiting yourself to say 250,000 people as a potential job market, open yourself up to the world, and it turns into millions and millions and millions. And therefore you can cast your net wide. If you've got a good recruitment system, you can cast net as wide as you want, and then find the golden nuggets hidden amongst all the rough.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's get into this kind of like nitty gritty of like creating systems and actually how to manage the performance of a remote team, Steve, because I know that you've really cracked this. So what are your top tips for doing that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, a really interesting question to talk about, because as we've mentioned before, there are challenges of working with people remotely because it's not in the traditional sense. We haven't, in this country, we've not grown up with it, like you said before. So we have to think differently about the way we work. You can't manage somebody who's on the other side of the world in the same way you would manage somebody in the UK, and I think, or locally. And so the idea of, for example, popping into someone's office and having a chat or speaking to somebody, or, you can see them on the other side of the office, so you can sort of see, are they messing around and playing on their iPhone, or are they actually doing some work? And all these fears that started coming in, and like meeting people at the, they talk about one of the problems of COVID was that the water fountain chit chat, that all stopped. So people stopped socializing within their own offices, and they stopped like actually building relationships. And so a lot of companies started doing like coffee mornings, like remote coffee mornings. Everyone would grab a cappuccino or whatever and go and sit around for 10 minutes before work starts on a Friday morning, and sort of trying to keep that together. The companies that have tried to overcome the challenges of working remotely in our country and during COVID have also given some other good ideas to this whole remote working way. So thinking about that sort of stuff is very, very important. But going back to your sort of question specifically about sort of managing how you actually, so the nuts and bolts of it. And so probably the two biggest game changers when you're working, it doesn't matter if someone's remote or in the other side of the world or they're in the other office, I would still do these same two things. One is to start using a task management app. So something like Asana is the one that we use in our company. It's the one that lots of companies use. But it doesn't really matter what you're using, to be honest. Using Trello, ClickUp, Monday.com, it doesn't really matter. But the point is that delegating your work by using a task manager, and I go into detail on this on my podcast. I've got an episode on this, so it's about 20 minutes just talking about this one subject. So you can find me on there if you want to find out more in detail, but I'll do your summary now. But so delegating somebody a task on a task board, as we call them. So imagine just a board, like a whiteboard, and you put some columns on it. And just in the simplest sense, pending, doing, done. That's it. You can make it more complicated than I do, but you don't need to. And what that allows you to do as the manager is at a snapshot, by just glancing at their digital online board in your task management app, you can see what's in their queue to happen next, what they're actually working on right now, and what they finished and are waiting for you to review. Now, you can't get that if you start trying to delegate work out through email or messenger or whatever. And it gets even worse when you start having problems with the tasks that you delegated, which there inevitably will be in the beginning and also as you go through. So you send over a task to somebody and they ping you back a question and say, oh, yeah, thanks for the task. I'll get on with it. Oh, just had one question about that. Great. You reply back. Oh, by the way, I've just got 3 more tasks for you to do. Can you just do number 4 before you do number 2? And number 1, prioritize that, but after number 4? And then they come back and say, yeah, that's fine, but I don't really understand number 2. And number 1's now conflicting with number 4. Can you just give me some clarification? I'll just get Bob to help you out. Here, Bob, I forwarded you 6 emails regarding this thread. This is the reality of what it used to be like before I started using task management apps. And you'd be pinging these messages. It's a total mess. And you're like, who the hell sent that message? Who said what, when, how? In the threads all over the place. You've got half of it on text messaging, half of it on WhatsApp, a little bit on Facebook Messenger, and then a couple of emails. Impossible to manage. So that's the scenario of what my business used to look like. And then I learned about task management apps. And as I said, the one I use is Asana. And before this, I actually started with Trello, but moved to Asana. And it just totally revolutionized my world. And really simply, you've got picture that task board I mentioned in my head. So pending, doing, done. And so at a glance, you can see what they're doing right now. If you've got a problem with one of the tasks you delegated, you comment on the task. And therefore, you can have a whole conversation. You can bring in other people. They can see the thread. It's all nicely compartmentalized onto the task which you are actually talking about. There's no crosswires. There's no mixed messages. There's no... you have to be a bit vigilant and say, look, all conversations about the task go on the task. So if someone pings you a message in Messenger and said, oh, I've just got a question about task number 3, it's this. You say, ask me in Asana. And if you're diligent about that, then your life becomes so much easier. So that's that one little take. So anyway, so task manager's number 1 tip of anything you can do to improve your business in general, but working remotely, 100%. And there's about 10 different advantages of using task managers. So that's the communication, delegation, visibility, and just feeling in control are probably the top 4. So next biggest tip is to use more video. And again, COVID has actually opened the world of using video to record yourself, your screen, to people which had no idea this stuff existed before. I remember when it first started out, I'd been using Zoom for about 2.5 years, and I shot this really sort of poor video. It was just like, I'll just do it. I was a bit bored. It's like how to use Zoom like a pro, and posted it on my completely unsuccessful YouTube channel at the time. It's still not particularly successful. And I can't remember, or was it on Facebook? I can't remember now. It got like over 1,000 views. This one video, so like Zoom, the Zoom frenzy went bonkers. And so, people started using Zoom as well. But it's more than just that. It's more than just video communication. I mean, this is essential. Like, we're having this chat now. You're in the UK, I'm in Sweden. You wouldn't have any idea. It doesn't matter where you're listening or watching this in the future. You can see our faces. We can build rapport. Huge amounts of, I can't remember exact figures, but about 87% is it of communication is visual. And so, I think maybe visual and tonal, I can't remember. But anyway, the words you say are pretty irrelevant. It's how you say and what you say, what your face looks like when you're saying them, and what your hands are doing at the time. And so by using video and communication when we're having meetings, we're adding in just depth into our conversation that is totally lost in email, totally lost in text, even worse in text messaging, because you're cutting your words short and using slang, and your thumbs are getting tired, so you tail off at the end and don't finish your sentences. So all that stuff is gone when you use video, because you're now talking like a real person. So one-to-one communication like this, or one-to-many communication using video, essential. But more than that, putting your camera on, recording your screen and showing someone, this is what I want you to do. And that is the absolute golden nugget of, sophisticated systems around doing this very eloquently, but at the absolute heart of how we teach people to systemise their business is the use of video. And that is so I'll just give you sort of backtrack 2 steps into the process because I'll put this in context and make it more meaningful. So we're talking about systemising your business. And actually what that means is, what am I going to get someone else to do for me? That's really what we're talking about here. How am I going to get someone else to do it is the system. What am I going to get is the most important first place to start. So knowing what to outsource first is the first step in this journey to getting to where I'm going to answer your question. And so deciding what's outsourced first, really, really simply, don't start outsourcing anything you're not already doing. That'll come. There's time for that. Once you've freed up your headspace, freed up your time, and then you've got time, all the time in the world to think about what else you can do. So all your LinkedIn marketing, your social media stuff, your building stuff on Canva, whatever you want to do, building your website, all that stuff you wish you were doing, you wish you had time to do. The reason you haven't got time to do it is because you're doing too much yourself. And once you've freed up your time, you then have the time to think about how I'm going to get someone else to do it. And the skills as well. It's a bit like Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. You've got to learn the skills before you can actually do the big work or have that big fight at the end of Karate Kid. And so the way you learn the skills and to get benefit from it on the journey is to pick tasks that you're currently doing that are taking a long amount of time and that aren't particularly complex. And those are the ones you start outsourcing. And there are 2 reasons for that. One is, if you start outsourcing stuff you don't know how to do it very well, it's going to take you a long time to think about it. You're probably going to get it wrong. They're going to get frustrated when it doesn't come back right. You might not even know what right looks like because you're not very good at it yourself. Whereas conversely, if you outsource something you're good at, even if something you like, you know how to do it. You've done it 50 times over. You could do it with your eyes shut. So showing someone else how to do it will be easy. And so the next time you do that task, which you're doing anyway, so you're doing these tasks anyway, the next time you do that task, you hit record on your screen recording app. The one I recommend is Screencast-O-Matic, but you can use Loom or whatever you're using, it doesn't really matter. Hit record, so you're recording your screen and your voice, and ideally have a little picture of yourself in the corner, because again, you're building rapport at every opportunity. And you're literally going to do the task as you would anyway, but you're going to talk yourself through it. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Why is it important? What do I actually want you to produce at the end of it? Where do you want that to be saved? What access do you require to actually do this task? I've got an acronym. I'm just confusing myself because I'm doing it in the wrong order because I'm not using the acronym. What access is required to do it? What deliverables do you have? What checks are what are the common mistakes that are made? How long is this going to actually take you to do? And also, what do I need to tell you to be able to do it? So say I'm going to show you how to set up a Facebook event here. So I'll probably need to tell you the name. I need to give you the image. I need to give you the time, the date. So these are all the things, the inputs into the task that you need to give this person in order to do it. So you're recording yourself doing it. You're going through, we have a DIDACT acronym. I should just use my DIDACT acronym rather than just winging it. The DIDACT acronym is basically describe the task, what the inputs, what the deliverables, what the access is required, what checks need to be done, and how long does it take. So I've got a framework which I'll happily share with you, Jane. You can share with your audience, which is basically the DIDACT framework, which is how we get people to outsource really efficiently. And so you're recording your screen, you know this task, you're doing it anyway, it's taking you no longer than it would have taken to do it anyway, and now you've got a guide of how you do that, which you then stick into a task on your task management app that you set up for your VA, or your assistant, whoever that is, your staff member, you assign it to them, you stick a due date on it, and you're done. That's how you systemize your business, because every time you do that, you're now saving time, and save 10 minutes a day, 50 minutes a week, add that up over the course of a year, and you save yourself a week. Save an hour a day by doing this. Just a few tasks a day, 6 weeks a year by saving an hour a day when you add it up 40-hour weeks.
Wow.
The benefits of this are huge for very small amounts of input.
Yeah, and that's a lot of time saving. And considering that time is the most precious asset of all, along with health, because you can't get it back, that's what it's all about, really, isn't it? Yeah. It's about saving time and making time, really, for the things that matter most. So, yeah, I get it. Now, I just wanted to pick you up on something that you said, Steve, because you said, well, first of all, you've got to know how to do everything before you can actually hand it off. Is that right? Or
No, sorry. I'm sorry if I gave that impression.
No, okay.
But the easiest things to outsource first are things you already know. So when you're trying, that's what the analogy of the Karate Kid is he's learning to fight, and Mr. Miyagi is teaching him to wax a car and to paint a fence, because he's teaching him the moves, he's teaching him the skills he needs to then combine together to be the expert karate guy. Same goes with anything you're learning. You've got to learn the skills. So learn them on something you know well. And that's the first thing, is because you want something that you don't have to think about, because you're thinking about, how am I going to outsource this? You don't want to also think about, how do I do the thing I'm trying to outsource? It just adds too much complexity, and you'll end up getting it wrong. And as I say, ending up with frustration. So that's the first problem. And the second thing is, if you're not already doing it and you're feeling overwhelmed, if you try to do something you don't know well now, you're just adding to your existing workload, which would make you more overwhelmed. So free your time first, then systemize your business.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, one of the things that I've done fairly recently is built out an automated webinar funnel. So I'm not saying, when I say I've done it, no, I haven't, because I am not a very techie person. And if I'd done it, it would have taken me a very, very long time to do. So I did the bits that I was good at, which is the copy and making the videos and all the stuff that I find easy. But I actually got somebody else to do all of that for me. So, and then he ran into some problems, because it was all fine doing part of it. But then we got to this point where it really started to go into some deep tech. And actually, at that point, it needed to go beyond what he was doing. And we needed to get some specialist, basically like a tech person, to finish it off and do all the APIs and integrations and sort out all the little glitches and all of that kind of thing. So I think the thing that I learned from doing that is that you have to know what the end result is, don't you? That you're sort of aiming for. You have to be clear about that. And I think in my own experience, when it gets murky and when it gets difficult, is when you're not 100% sure what you're kind of aiming for. And so that's when you're giving mixed messages. And that's when, really the communications become strained. Would you say that that's been your experience as well?
Yeah, I would love to sit here and tell you that from the first day that I ever started working with staff and especially remote teams, that it all went perfectly well. And I never fell into the traps that you just described, but that would be absolute nonsense. And still do to this day from time, and that's just the reality of it. And I think that you've hit the nail on the head with it, though. If you're very clear on the outcome and you've got a competent person, they'll probably get there. If you've got a very clear outcome and even an incompetent person, they'll probably still get there. If you've got a very unclear outcome, even with a competent person, they're never going to get there. Because if you don't know where you're going, they can't take you there. And so for me, goal setting, or being really clear on the end of a project, and that will be there'll be stages in the project. So we've adopted a loose adoption of the agile framework for project management, which is very, very briefly is like, instead of saying, I'm going to design a new computer game, like say a Tomb Raider, it's like, I'm going to deliver level 1, and then I'm going to finish level 2, and then I'm going to finish level 3 and deliver those to the marketplace as you get there. So you don't have to, or like your course, for example, you can create the first sprint in the agile terminology. The first project would be to get it on the webinar. The second project would be to write course module 1 and get that online. The second, you can build it that way. And so having that sort of framework really helped us to break down tasks into really achievable goals, but the goals that I could easily envisage or visualize because they weren't so far away. It was a nearer goal, so therefore you could actually put it into words and be very clear about it. And because there was less unknowns, the nearer a goal is, the less unknowns there are to get there. And so it makes it much easier for you to verbalize that or to document it. So whenever we're starting a new project now, I say whenever, 9 times out of 10, unless I totally forget, like I did the other day when we started off with a new member staff and realized a week in that we hadn't done what I'm just about to tell you. So I'm not perfect by any means. But when we remember to do this, it's brilliant. And we basically have a project vision board. And that vision board describes why we're doing this project, what is the purpose of it at quite a high level, and then talks about things like who are the stakeholders involved, what's the purpose of the project, what are the aims of the project, why are we doing this? What does it solve? Why will the result of this project stand out? So being really clearly defined, and the who of the project. And then what are the business objectives? Why are we doing this from a business terms? Because that's a really good check to have. Because if you start doing a project and you can't fill in that box, you shouldn't be doing the project. What is the business advantage of this? Because often we can start as business owners things that sound like a good idea, but unless you can put it into terms of how am I going to create either more value to my clients or more profit in my bank, don't do it. Unless you can define one of those two things, I think. And so, yeah, having that project vision board plus this idea of multiple short goals with very short time spans, a week, 2 weeks, to try and achieve those goals, that makes it much, much more easier to engage with people. We were talking about before about outsourcing stuff versus stuff you don't know. I'm not saying don't try and outsource anything you don't know ever, but not at all. But there's ways and means to do it, so you don't end up sort of in this scenario we're describing now about not really having very clear goals because you're not really sure what you are doing and what you need to be done. But really simply, if you want to design a website, stop getting too creative, stop being too personal about it. And, if I go back 20 years, I think how many thousands of pounds I've spent on websites that don't exist anymore over the years. And so my tip for designing a website is to spend a couple of hours searching the web, going onto the most beautiful sites in the world, sort of Google searches, find a website you like the look of, get a picture of it or get the URL of it, use the same sort of structure of it, rewrite the words in your own words and send that to your designer and be done with it. So don't try and design the hell out of something. You can obviously use your own brand colors. But once they can say, that is what that is what I want you to create. Use my brand guidelines if you've got them. And then here's the words I want you to put in each of the boxes on the screen, on each page. That's how you can very quickly design a website and get complete clarity. Because if you go the other way, which I've done in the past, and you sort of have a conversation with the web designer, what sort of site do you want? What feelings do you want? What's your target audience? I'm not saying that's not important, but I don't think for businesses when they've designed their first website, it should be the first things on their mind. You should be thinking about, how do I get this done as quickly as possible that doesn't distract me from actually running my business and making money and gets a result that I'm happy with? And copying without copyright copying is the way I would go with pretty much everything now. And yeah, so that goes for any type of thing you're wanting to create. So we're doing quote cards at the moment for Instagram and Facebook for our podcast. So I just said to my virtual assistant, I said, here's a quote card, took a screenshot. So back to your screen recording software, took a screenshot of the quote card on someone else's Instagram page, said, can you design me one of those with my brand guidelines in Canva? And she's not got any graphic design background, but she copied what was there, put my brand on it, obviously changed the logos and stuff, and came back to me and I said, yep, that's brilliant. Let's use that then. So it's just simple, straightforward. Don't overthink this stuff. Don't always need graphic designers to do simple stuff. You can just need someone who's half competent that can actually follow, use the common sense and copy someone else. So
yeah, and I mean, certainly with graphic design, there are so many incredible templates on Canva that really somebody just needs to learn how to use Canva.
And Barto, there's videos, there's mountains of free sites, of paid sites, of, so you can go down that route. We had a graphic designer in-house for about 18 months. He designed loads of stuff for logos and everything like that. But ultimately, except for logos and, product design, like product logos and things like that, for most of the other stuff, you don't really need templates these days. You just go onto Canva, you just remake something that somebody's got, or like say, you just get templates from, exactly what you just said.
Yeah, templates, totally. Well, Steve, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you tonight. So I'd love you to share some of your freebies and your giveaways with some of our audience. We talked about that. So first of all, tell them about your podcast.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Jane. So we launched our podcast a couple of months ago now, Systemise Your Success. It's been, we did very well. We've been top 10 in 3 countries. We're currently in about 28 countries in the world, which I think is amazing. I have no idea how this compares with anyone else, but I'm very impressed. The feedback has been absolutely fantastic. The podcast is all about helping small business owners to leverage apps, technology, virtual assistants, systems to systemize your success, to create a business that you can be proud of, that you can scale, that you can actually create a lifestyle that you want without getting overwhelmed in the process. So the guests we've had on so far have been everything from small business investing, so for small business finance, from accounting, for making profit in your business. We've had wealth builders guys on, so Christian Rodwell and Kevin Whelan the other day. Rob Moore's been on. Yeah, and I've had about 10 interviews already in the bag that they're going to be lined up. And we've got about 20 episodes out there already and many, many more on the way. Everything from recruitment to apps to virtual assistants to creating systems and outsourcing work.
Wow, that's absolutely brilliant. And anybody who's enjoyed this interview, I invite them to just head straight on over there and check it out. Sounds great. And Steve, also, you've got a couple of giveaways that you're going to share with our audience as well, aren't you? And you can put those in the chat as well on the group afterwards. So tell giveaways as well.
Yeah, so two things I thought would be really useful, really based on what we've been talking about today, were our Recruit Right framework, which is the framework we developed from hiring about 120 virtual assistants over the past 3 years. And it's our systemise approach, as I was saying before, is be able to cast the net as wide as possible and then quickly filter down to the final shortlist and then how to actually get those on board. So that's our Recruit Right framework. And the second one is really going into detail about the DIDAC framework I talked about before with regards to actually how you actually outsource efficiently and use task management apps. So loads of detail in there for you to go and dig into and get started.
Great. Okay, so we'll share those. So once again, Steve, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and experience about systems and outsourcing so openly. And thank you for all of the value, incredible value that you've created. So look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for having me, Jane. It's been a pleasure.